Hi everyone, welcome back to Highly Inspired. I'm Ella.
And I'm Jordan.
Welcome to our 50th episode.
Yes.
This is exciting.
50th episode spectacular.
Yes, so
got creative with our title this time.
We've been doing this we're almost coming up on our 3-year anniversary. And we have slowly evolved the podcast over these 3 years, and definitely we went through like memory lane this week, and we realized how much we've evolved and how much the podcast has evolved and how much we appreciate like you guys coming on this journey with us. And we just hit 500 subscribers, so that's really exciting. Please share with your friends so we can have more people see the podcast. But so we want to kind of do multiple things on this episode, goes down memory lane, like kind of laugh at some stuff, look back at time, and then also kind of touch on where we see the podcast going and kind of where we're at now and what we'll be doing like in the future. So
yeah, something that we've always tried to incorporate into all of our episodes is touching on past, present, and future tenses for whatever the topic is. And so sort of what we're going to do with this is looking at the past, present, and future of our overall sort of content of the podcast. So I think that's good to do every now and then, since it's sort of like our digital time capsule in a way. I mean, some people have photo journals, some people have a portfolio of movies, films that they make. And for us, like, this is kind of...
We have hours of our voices published online, so that's fun.
Yeah, and while we might not be talking about our everyday lives and, just regular events that happen week to week, we talk about, more hard-hitting things like our values and our deep, dark thoughts on the world.
And sex robots.
And sometimes it can be as surface level as sex robots. Yeah, we kind of hit the ground running with that, which was our first ever attempt at recording. And unfortunately, you guys cannot catch it live on Apple Podcasts or any podcast streaming service anymore. But we're gonna play you a sneak peek if you haven't ever heard it before.
This is the first episode, and this was recorded literally on voice memos on our iPhone, and it evolved to what we have today, which is like our
pretty much a night and day difference in terms of our sophistication and production, well-versity. And I think we should just let it speak for itself.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
And right now, she joined all these group chats like online where these men just talk about their sex robots. They treat him like a wife. They cook for the sex robots. The guys learn how to braid.
An old man braiding his robot wife's hair.
So guys, fun fact.
Oh my gosh, this is even worse than the movie Her. Her was pretty whack and pretty advanced for the time when it came out. And this is real life, not even a fictional movie. Like, this is what's actually happening.
Yeah, no,
that's absurd.
Very, very animated, as you can tell.
We were really excited. And this was inspired from Whitney Cummings. We had seen Whitney Cummings on Joe Rogan, and then she had just done like a comedy special. And I feel like for me, this was like my first intro into really getting into stand-up and getting into like the history of comedy and getting into really getting into Joe Rogan and stuff. Before, like, I wasn't as well versed in his podcast, I would say, and I was definitely more interested in like IEW podcasts or like anything political, anything kind of like that. I wasn't into the more like cultural pieces, and I definitely like didn't watch like comedy specials regularly or know about like the Comedy Store and that sort of thing. So this was like a period of time where that was like an evolution for me, at least. I think kind of leading up to this episode.
Yeah, I would say that was similar for me too. I had heard of Whitney Cummings. I knew about her Malibu zoo animal scandal or whatever.
What was this?
She just was thrown under a lot of fire for sort of raising Cain over how like certain farmers and ranches that were in Malibu were treating their animals, because
is this the
and this is even like the wine tours, the Malibu wine
with
tours.
the giraffes?
Yeah, like there's like safari parks there, and so she kind of was. I believe. I mean, I might be wrong about this, but I believe she was sort of protesting what they were doing with the animals. So I'd heard of her from that, and then all of a sudden I find out she's doing this whole new special, like basically geared around sex robots, which is just like what? It's super random.
Yeah, and we didn't just do this episode because we were like, oh, we want to do something like controversial or whatever, but we saw this like niche to talk about something that affected human dynamics, affected psychology, affected dating, it affected marriages, it affected humanity, like us not being like so isolated. You hear about people in countries like Japan where the suicide rates are really high because everyone's obsessed with technology and porn, and the same thing is happening in the US, and that was kind of what this episode was about. It wasn't just like, oh, we're talking about this for fun, but we wanted to talk, especially at the end, we like got into the dynamics of, well, does this will this affect rape going down or up? Will this affect marriages going up or down? Like those, like, will this make people more isolated? Will it make people less isolated? Which gender will benefit more from this? Which one won't? And how will this affect reproductive rates and people having kids? Like, we talked about those things that we still focus on now, but it was kind of doing it through this like pop culture, very innocent, silly way that was still childish and kind of a little high school, I would say.
Yeah, a little hyper. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is factual. I think we did touch on some really interesting ideas and thoughts surrounding it, but yeah, just the delivery, especially in the beginning with that hyper childish tone.
Yeah, like this
that's
here.
very, very different to our delivery now.
Yeah. Like even this right here where we're
an offer like that, then something is a little up. Okay, so can we talk about how exactly that process works when designing the robot? Because apparently she got to actually go to the factory and basically pick out all of the parts to it or see how they do that.
And for her, since normally what happens is the guy and goes picks, it's kind of like remember Build Your Own American Girl doll? Do you remember that?
Yes.
You build your own, like you pick the hair color and
It's
the
like
eyes.
Build-A-Bear.
Yes, Build-A-Bear.
It's very sick and twisted Build-A-Bear.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but for her, since she wanted one to look like her, they molded her face.
Okay, so she had wax or silicone.
Yeah, and like her ears, her whole head, and then they molded it specifically for her. But normally, what you do is you'd be like, oh, I want Scarlett Johansson's lips, or I want.
We are not good at giving each other this room to finish our sentences. A lot of interrupting.
Well, I feel like we were just so excited to be recording and to be like going and doing our thing. Something else that I noticed is just like all the background noise too, because I feel like because we're literally like our phone was right here. Like that was the only thing that was picking up any audio. So like clearly it's going to take in everything that's going on, we
hadn't gotten used to being still and trying to minimize
I'm still
that
working.
extra sound.
I'm still working on being still like hyper energized.
Yeah, it's hard.
But I feel like okay, so we did that episode, and then we did about how many? It looks like I think we have like about 10 that aren't on the website, right? Mm-hmm. That we've archived.
Yes, and all of them are different in interesting ways, like whether we use a different intro tune or tried a different sort of series of segments within each episode. We did a full movie review of Joker,
That
which
one's still up, actually.
That was an episode solely dedicated to just talking about the movie and the themes that were brought to light in the movie. And we've never done any other episode like that is only focused on like one piece of content. Although 1984,
Yep.
not a movie, we read the book and basically did like a book club episode surrounding it.
Yeah, and then we did the dating and hookup culture one, which again, like that one is super inappropriate, which is why
I think that's just it was inappropriate. It was so vulgar. And I don't know if for previous listeners, we try not to cuss if we can. Sometimes, rare occasion, we use it for emphasis. But oh my gosh, in that one, it was just every other word. Like, what were we thinking?
And
It's
Jordan
not even attractive to listen to.
Jordan was saying, and this is funny, when we were talking right before we got on air, and this I like started cracking up. We were talking about how when we first published like the dating hookup culture one, like the sex robot ones, like some of these early episodes, we were so excited to get the word out and share it with family friends that like we sent this to like our grandparents, our parents, ex-boyfriends. I'm not even kidding. Like this,
like friends that were like 4 times removed, like acquaintances, like no one that really was even at that level as a friend or in a relationship with us.
The guy that I had a crush on at the time that I ended up dating, like I was like proud of this body of work and like shared this with him. And I remember I was like, yeah, like we're doing some research on who's that guy that would like bang his head into things and like light
Supreme Patty.
Yes. I remember texting him and I was like, yeah, like I think our next episode's gonna cover Supreme Patty.
Wait, what one did that end up like getting featured in?
It was in Why Social Media Sucks, and we did a part 1 and a part 2.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. That's on brand. Yeah. So, moral of the story, I mean, just during that time when we were figuring out these ropes, we were sending this content to so many people, and we're just wholeheartedly proud.
Oh yeah, we had no shame in it, and I think that we had to get to that level of just owning our content and putting it out there, even if it wasn't perfect yet, and if it wasn't the product that we wanted it to be, because like we had to go through this trial and error stage of around 6 months in order to get the tone of what we really wanted it to be, you know? And then in between that period, I went abroad and Jordan stayed in California, and we didn't know like where this was going to go, but we decided that we still halfway around the world, like 12 hours, 13 hours apart, that we wanted to keep doing this. And we actually did like 3 or 4 or 5 episodes while I was abroad, and some of those are still up. And those again were recorded via our phones, because we didn't even have like the Zoom or any of the technology that we have now with the nice mics that go into the computer. So we literally just would FaceTime each other and then record and then merge the audio together and publish. And that was pretty much what we did for a few episodes. And then finally, the last one we did like that, I think, was the Zoom University one. And then we were like, we're done with the remote stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we were done.
Well, we also came to that realization when sort of everything in the world shifted dramatically with COVID, and you coming back home from being abroad. You came back home earlier than you planned. Rioting broke out like in every city, and it was just so like everyone remembers this time. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I mean at one point it was yesterday, but now it's like almost 3 years ago. So that was when we said goodbye to the inconsistency that we had in the show of Highly Inspired 1.0, and then we decided that we were going to take it super seriously, that we really wanted to not capitalize isn't the word, but like take careful consideration of the time that we were in with so much going on, and sort of bring that more into the show and say goodbye to the wannabe pop culture, fun, everything type of girls, and be what we truly felt like we were being called to be, I guess. Or at least just explore that and try to explore that change in tone. And you can see in because we have some of those older episodes up, and then the highly inspired 1.0 or 2.0 early episodes too. You can totally tell the shift like within a matter of like 2 months.
Well, yeah, we started with the America's Wake Up Call, which was the episode that we did a week or so after the George Floyd incident. And this was a time where, you know, up until this point, COVID was still this like weird period where people were baking cakes and going on bike rides every day and like
scrolling TikTok for hours.
TikToks. And then this happened and people kind of forgot about COVID, and we didn't know if I honestly thought, oh, well, COVID's over now. Like this is the new thing. And then it became so I think that it was the first time where it felt like you had to publicly say something, and if you didn't publicly say something, people would like come after you. And and before that, like, yeah, I had seen people like post certain infographics on certain political things or whatever, but it had never been at this level where everyone was doing it at the same time. And there was so much pressure from people on social media to do something, and there was no excuse not to, because we weren't even in the real world. We were only in the digital world at this time. So Jordan and I, and we didn't really feel comfortable just posting like the same thing on social media. And before we knew what the phrase I support the current thing was, I think instinctually we knew that we didn't want to like go down that route. And so I think that forced us to look at the podcast as a platform to speak on something like this.
Yeah.
I
think I've mentioned this before, but I mean, I've personally never been a huge rule follower. And not that seemed like a rule, it wasn't some legal legislation that you had to be posting certain things. But any time that I come across something that seems like a forced set of behaviors, my brain just like instantly wants nothing to do with it because it doesn't come from me. There's no earnestness in it involved at all. So I think when I first saw that, like that was sort of the first impression that I was experiencing, and I didn't even really know how to explain it to anybody. It was just like, no, like that didn't come from me. And for whatever movement that anyone's supporting, like wouldn't you want that to come from them and not just some top down sort of pressure that encourages them to do so?
You felt like it didn't feel authentic.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think at that point we felt like we wanted the podcast to be authentic. And so the best way that we could kind of kill two birds with one stone was by doing an episode on that. And looking back, even though I know that at the time and still today, like looking back at that episode like an archive, I know that we spoke the truth and we did the best we could to speak on the situation, given the time, given the information that was available at that period of time. But like looking back, it's like, oh, I already realized like I still self-censored a little bit, a lot
For
more
sure.
than I do now. And maybe it was at that time it felt so stressful because I hadn't put myself out there in that way yet at all. And that was scarier than what we do now, where it's like there's pretty much zero filter whatsoever. Because it's like a slow, you're building like a slow tolerance to being able to do that. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think that first step is always like the scariest, you know?
So if our earliest episodes were a 0 on the scale of how uncensored we were, and us now is the 100 on that spectrum. I would say even that first episode that we did talking about the rioting and the Black Lives Matter movement, the amount of censored that we were was nowhere near now. At that point in time, we felt like, oh my gosh, this is so night and day. This is so bold. Like, we're taking such a huge leap. But looking back, it really was only just baby steps from how we were communicating our thoughts before. And hey, that's a win.
Yeah.
At that point in time, that was a huge win for us. And as we've progressively become more and more comfortable sharing our beliefs and how we feel in these topics, I think that any time that you can see that growth and towards being more comfortable is a win.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, wow, I didn't notice this, but the post that we did for social media for that got like 500 likes. I never noticed that till now. Anyways.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it must have been because we like put a lot of thought into it and stuff. But
probably because we're still hashtagging.
Well, something that was really important to me about this episode was the links that we put in at the end. We made sure not to put anything that we knew directly went to the BLM organization because we were just sketched out about where the money was going. So we chose like specific people, like specific GoFundMes. We chose organizations that helped with like prison reform, like things that were like super specific and direct. Or like we gave like contact information so that people could put in like suggestions for police reform, but we didn't post the BLM.
Let's talk about that because we uploaded those before we knew all of this recent information about where all of that funded money went towards.
Yeah, to the
we
mansions.
didn't know that before.
Yeah, do people know that the money went to the mansions of the like, founders and stuff of BLM? I feel like a lot of people don't know that. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what our reasoning was, but I think that it went down to
maybe we were just seeing the same sources, the same resources, and we just were subconsciously trying to break it up or
No, I remember it was very intentional. Like it was very intentional. It was like at least for me, I was like, I do not want to put BLM organization anywhere on this. And I think that we did a really good job trying to separate the movement from the organization because the organization was clearly corrupt. And what's come out is that a lot of these protesters that were like the Antifa types, the rioters, like a lot of it's paid protesters. And a lot of it was done to get a certain to help the election. And then another thing that I found out after all of this was that if you look at the cities that were targeted and then you look at the investment groups like BlackRock and stuff like that went into those neighborhoods and were able to buy real estate super cheaply, it's insane. So you have these communities where a lot of it was minority groups that have businesses there, have homes there, have apartments, and then they get destroyed and become like a Detroit situation. And then that can just get bought up by investors. And that and this woman had uncovered that and wrote a whole article and research paper just on that, following that alone. And so you could see that, well, okay, like a group like BLM, like they could get funded to or Antifa or whatever
to destroy neighborhoods so then these companies can come in and buy it up for cheaper than what they would be if they were intact.
Yeah, it's all just a scam. And I think too, like I just watched the new Dinesh D'Souza documentary on the election fraud, and it's probably like the best thing that I've seen so far that is the most like scientific in terms of being able to like explain what happened with the 2020 election. And it's kind of similar to this and the drug cartel and human trafficking and all these things are very it's a very similar pattern where you are paying instigators and it's all getting channeled through these nonprofit groups, similar to what you discovered with the ESG scores and how that works. It's very similar systems, and what they were able to prove was through like geo tracking of people's phones. They could pick up patterns of individuals that would, in these like swing counties or swing states, that would go to multiple different stops, like the drop box,
The ballot boxes.
not even like the post office, just the ballot box. And they would bring like maybe 3 to 5 ballots, maybe 10 most. So it wasn't like they were doing these huge ballot dumps. It was over time. And each person could go to like 20, 25 in a day. Some of them were going out like, and then they had footage because each ballot box was required to have a camera and it was supposed to be public info so anyone could get that camera footage. So they paired the geotagging data that they bought from companies, from like iPhone social media companies, and they paired it with the video, and they could see that people were like ballot stuffing. And then they kind of work backwards and they figured out, oh, okay, they're getting these ballots from nonprofits. Okay, they're getting paid, you know? So it's like, it's very similar to this. And so I think that a lot of our country is kind of run in this way, which is scary when you think about it. A lot of things that seem
there's
like,
definitely
you know,
there's definitely a science to making all of these things seem like it's just coincidental and sort of spur of the moment, when actually mostly everything has some sort of strategy behind it.
Yeah.
And some sort of plan of attack, some sort of curated set of activities, behaviors, agenda items that need to be hit in order for it to be executed properly. So yeah, that was exactly it. I haven't watched the whole documentary yet. I feel like I figured out the title though, which is 2,000 Mules. I would assume that the mules in that sort of title is like they're pack mules being hired, right? Yeah.
So they basically, it's 2000 because they identified, and they had very like conservative criteria. So each mule had to have like, they had to have video camera footage. They had to have gone to like at least, I think it was like 10 ballots in a day. Like, I don't know. They had all this criteria. So it was like very conservative. Like they had way more people that were doing it, but they made it very conservative. And then they got it down to this number of 2,000 mules, and that they did all the math. And then they showed that like that was enough to swing the election, because like even in states like Arizona, like it was a 10,000 margin of votes. That's not a big number. So if you have a few thousand people every day for several months dropping 3 or 4 ballots off, that accumulates over time. And I think that when we were hearing the election stuff, it sounded very like far-fetched at the time, because this is what they always do. They always take something that could really happen, and like it's a lot more simple to get it done, like, you know, like really what they prove with these mules, versus this crazy conspiracy theory of, you know, like
ballots dropping out of the sky.
Fake ballots. Like these were real ballots, you know, like Santa Claus figure showing up with bundles of ballots and stuffing them in the like counting. Like it wasn't
it's
that
so
crazy.
it's so under the radar.
Yeah. And that's how a lot of this stuff goes, is they try to make you seem like you're crazy, but really it's not that complicated to
it wasn't the Sharpies, you know, it wasn't the pens in the ink bleeding onto the table and messing up the scanners or anything like that. It was just something like totally different. And at the end of the day, the margin was super slim, but that's all they needed. That's how our electoral college system works. Like you don't need, you know, a million different, like 10,000 is 10,000. That's a small number, but it's also they crossed what they needed to cross.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a good movie. I recommend watching it. And then after that episode, we did Ode to a Better Future, and this was the one that I think we talked about kind of reflecting on all of 2020. And this was the first, that Ode to a Better Future, that's what we just talked about. What was the one where we talked about COVID for the first time?
take charge of the new world.
Okay, I love that episode. That's like one of my favorite episodes.
I am very proud of that episode because, I mean, we spoke about what was happening with the world through COVID in a very positive way. This was a very positive episode. It wasn't doomsday. Oh my gosh, the world's changing. How can we keep up? We're on lockdown still. Australia is literally like sinking into the ocean. Like we were not.
I don't think we even knew about Australia yet at this point.
No, yeah, I don't think we did either. I was just using that example.
Yeah.
But we were not speaking on the COVID events like in this doomsday type of tone. We were very positive, and we were experiencing shifts with like still being fully online for school and like doing internships and trying to figure out what is our future career setup going to be after college, given all of these corporate changes and yeah, it was a lot to sort of digest and talk about. But I am proud of that, though, that we were able to see that silver lining and construct an episode topic surrounding the horrors that were going on with people dying and the rioting and just all of that craziness, and sort of talk about it in a better way. So
what do you think? Do you think if it hadn't been for us taking this perspective that early on with COVID and being like, okay, instead of trying to push for the old world to still happen, we're going to like take on these adjustments and we're going to try to navigate this and be flexible? Like, do you think that molded the life decisions that you've made up until this point and the life that you
100%.
have right now?
100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it happens all the time. You know, having the strength to pivot with small decisions, big decisions, massive life changes. Like, if you've done that before, no matter how small or big the scale is, if you've done it before, you are at least somewhat prepared to do it again. Mm-hmm. And in that period of time, when the world changed so drastically, there were so many people who got stuck because I think they realized in themselves that they had not done that before, pivoted their lives, you know, on any stretch of the equation for a very long time. And so that's why like the panic ensued and people didn't know what to do. Well, and so I think we were trying to speak to those people and be like, okay, well, here's where we need to pivot and here's why you should pivot. And if you don't, you are going to fall behind in these very key areas of life, financially, career-wise, you know, socially, spiritually, just overall health-wise. So
health-wise, that's a great one because people, do you think it's because we had a false sense of stability here in the US for so long? Mm-hmm. Like ever since, you know, the baby boomers are the oldest generation right now that are still alive. I mean, there might be some people that are from the greatest generation that fought in World War II. We saw some of those people when we were younger, but most of them have passed. That was like our great-grandparents and stuff like that. So everyone that's been super close to us has been baby boomer or post-baby boomer generation. And I feel like until COVID, where it really blew up everything, or even the major things that happened in the 20th century pre-COVID, 9/11, the '08 crisis, Iraq War, those things that we lived through that we didn't even put that much attention on. Like now we've even put more attention on that because once we saw how the norm isn't for us to just carry on as we've always carried on. The norm of society is, like you said, to pivot, to adapt, to change, to embrace things that are scary and things that are new.
Yeah.
And
You would think that would be easy to do when you're doing it alongside every single person you know.
yeah.
Like,
But I think a lot of
that's
people
the most
didn't.
ideal. Like, you're going through this and you're pivoting along so many other people, yet it's still hard.
Yeah.
I don't really get that mentality. It's just kind of cowardly from the get-go.
For me, at this point in my life, I had a dream internship in New York lined up, and it got completely canceled. Like, it didn't even go online, and I was very like devastated at that point. And there was a period of like a month, a few weeks, and I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. I knew I couldn't. There was no way to like salvage that, because it was like the whole city of New York is shut down. Like, you can't even go there. Like, there was just no hope of salvaging it. And so I had to kind of like do this pivot. Otherwise, I would just keep trying to push for this dream that doesn't exist for me anymore. And I think that that's part of our block as humans, is that we think that the future we envision for ourselves, we hold on to that, and then we can't even see like what is happening in front of us. And so therefore we aren't even reacting to that. Like, I'll give an example. Like, let's say you're dating someone, and you think like you have this like future in your head of what like the perfect person will look like, and that perfect timing and all of that. And then the person that you're dating meets like 98% of that criteria, but you're still holding on to this like 100% ideal thing that you came up with when you were 15 years old. And it's like, maybe you should like take a step back and just see the opportunity that's in front of you right now. And it might not be what you envisioned, but it might make you happier, actually, because sometimes life, I think, knows more about you than you know about yourself. I don't know. At least that's been the case for me.
No, I think that's super wise and mature, and I totally agree. I don't think very few things that were pre-envisioned or predetermined end up actually happening in that full absolute expectation that you had. Like, that really does not happen. And if it does, amazing, cool. But I feel like when that does happen, it's not because you planned it. It's just because it did. And especially with people, like, if you're looking for some ideal, perfect best friend, ideal, perfect relationship with whomever it may be, especially with a significant other, like, I think that a lot of people can fall down that rabbit hole of trying to search for such an ideal setup with somebody and such an ideal person to spend their time with, that they end up looking forever and ever, because, I mean, it's not out there.
Well, yeah, and I'm not saying like anyone should settle. I'm totally against settling. I don't think people should settle, because I think that if you marry the wrong person and then you're resentful, like, that's not good. But I do think, I think that a lot of people were paralyzed, and they were waiting for the old world to return, and they lost 2.5 years of their life. And then they also lost reality, because the people that chose to not wake up and chose to stay asleep have jeopardized themselves in more ways than one now. Because these are the types that were not awake to the vaccine, that were not awake to now more vaccines and the history of all the vaccines, and really understanding that, and just healthcare and pills and surgery and like all that. And then it's people that haven't been open to like education alternatives, and realizing that, oh, like, most kids get indoctrinated at school in some way or the other. It's people that didn't realize, oh, the CIA controls a lot of stuff. Oh, like, what happened with 9/11? What happened with the wars? What happened with Ukraine? It's because you didn't take the information that the pandemic gave you, and you didn't take those 2 years to grow with that new information, instead wanted to stay in the past. You know, and so I think this was our decision to move forward, and I think that was really important because that laid the foundation for us to,
Yes.
you know. Is there any part we should play? Should I just like play a random part of this episode? Let me see.
It might be a shot in the dark, but we can try.
Jingle? No,
Love.
so is that was the new one?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's our current
Yeah.
jingle, and I think we started that with
This
the beginning
episode.
of Highly Inspired 2.0, yeah.
I think you said something about it at the beginning, the jingle. Hey guys, welcome back to Highly Inspired. I'm Ella.
I'm Jordan.
Welcome back, guys, this week on the new episode. I don't know if you can tell, but we have some new mics and a new intro.
We have revamped our audio
So
setup.
transparent.
Yeah, we're going process by process. First it was the marketing, now it's the audio.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of podcasts have different setups. There's a whole world of equipment out there, but we hope that this kind of gives it a little bit more of like a radio laid back feel and
know.
gets rid of. All right. I think we've heard enough.
I think that, yeah.
Killing
but I
myself
really like
to
that
work this job that I
transparency.
don't even like.
Paying for gas, environmental issues.
Being in an area with horrible crime or horrible pollution, smog, stuff that isn't healthy for you. And not only just your mental well-being, but your physical well-being. Why did it take this horrible thing to finally show that to people
Yeah.
and shed light to it?
Well, what's crazy is that these people, if you're in New York, if you're in San Francisco, if you're in LA, if you're in these cities where your salary is adjusted for the cost of living there, so you make more money doing the same job in San Francisco as you would in Arizona, people are now realizing, oh, I'm contracted to that salary for at least a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3.
Yeah.
I'm going to move myself to Arizona, Texas, Florida, where it's well, that did 2 things. It messed up our market in Arizona.
Yeah.
And remember then a year later we talked about the Google thing where Google caught on to that, like people moving from certain cities.
Yes, then they created incentives for people to stay in
the
cities, and the incentives are wild. I'm sure they're still doing it.
Yeah.
It's like a severely increased amount in pay compared to people who live in suburban areas,
Yeah.
and they get like all these extra benefits, probably just more flexibility in their schedule.
More remote time, which that didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, probably some sort of assets that they're giving them. I don't know, but yeah, because I mean, everybody who's lived in America at all in the last 2 years knows like the amount of people who have been moving from state to state and have made massive moves from a state that they lived in forever, especially like Californians. Yeah, it's been a lot of getting out of places like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I feel like kind of the next stage that we went to was the 1984 episode, and this was when we started like getting back, I feel like, into politics a lot and listening to some like Daily Wire shows and getting kind of like the election was ramping up, so obviously like people get more political.
I remember this time we were absorbing so much content, you guys. It was like 5 podcast episodes a day. We were doing online school and we were basically at home all day long, so we were able to just be listening to podcasts and playing documentaries and
People were
just
scared to go
absorbing
out.
while we were
Yeah.
trying to pretend to do school. And I'm actually really grateful for that time because I learned a lot. I put my brain through a lot of exercises just trying to arrive to conclusions on how I felt about certain political stances. I was trying to dissect 1984. I feel like I did read briefly when I was younger, so I knew what it was,
I didn't know what it was.
but it was surfacing everywhere on Twitter, on social media. People were using it as a means of explaining what was going on with the pandemic and predictions for 2020, 2021. And so, yeah, we decided to read it. I'm really glad we did. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should bring back another episode that's like fully dedicated to a book again, because
I would love to do that.
I think that it's kind of nice for the audience too, and you guys who are listening maybe would agree, just to follow along one set topic, and have it be just super direct and straightforward. Like, here's our review of this book, of this movie. So maybe if you're into that,
We'll do it.
leave a comment, let us know. But
Yeah, I feel like, so we have clips on our Instagram of this one, because this is when we started doing the clips and we started like ramping up our social media stuff. And do people know? So we do everything in house. Like Jordan and I both have graphic design minors, and so like everything what's been cool about the podcast is we've also visually evolved as we've evolved through the audio and through our storytelling and through the content, our aesthetic. And we've even gone through like branding revamps. We've gone through website revamps. And that was like part of this time period too, because we were working during the fall while we had all this extra time being online with school and like not having social lives. We were doing our first website. We were building the podcast website from scratch, and that was a really great learning experience for me and for Jordan, and for us to really like test the limits and do things that we wanted to do. And we took our time with it, and we didn't just do like a Squarespace like template. We really tried to like customize it as much as possible. So I don't know, that was kind of like a fun time too, because
totally,
I don't know if we had done the traditional internships and had been in that routine and had so much social time too. Like if we had full social calendars during the fall, like I don't know if we would have had time to like prioritize that.
Yeah. Well, I also just think that at that time we both knew that the next sort of location for us to be present on for our overall brand would be a website, because we were on every other social media platform. We were on every listening platform. Although we weren't on YouTube yet, we were pretty much everywhere else. And so I think we knew that a website was the next thing to add to our inventory of just locations for people to find us on, and that would add another level of sort of sophistication and seriousness to our work, just to show, and to store our content. Like that's the best part about it.
Yeah.
It's like worst comes to worst, if every other listening platform and YouTube ban us and social media collapses, we've got a place where people can find us. Yeah. So
this was one of our, let's see,
himself into all of these different service jobs. Like he worked as a cook in a kitchen.
Yeah, you do not have the ability to think freely. And how they achieve this is through eliminating the English language that we know today. So something that I never thought about is like how cool it is that there's so many languages out there. There's so much richness in language. There's so many words. Like the dictionary is huge, right? And in this society, the goal is to decrease the language in the dictionary as much as possible. Like there are literally people in this society that is their job. And they're basically trying to develop a new language called Newspeak, where...
Okay.
How crazy is it that, so all of that, and even the Newspeak term, ties into the Ministry of Truth
Group.
And even now, 2022, we're talking about this in legit seriousness because it's happening.
Yes. There is legitimately the Ministry of Truth. I forget the official name, but it's through the Department of Justice, which already red flag. That should be a red flag right there. And it's all because Elon Musk bought Twitter. And this has been a huge thing that's erupted over the last week or so because, as we know, Twitter has been a social media, like almost all the social media platforms, that has censored, has kicked people off. I mean, it kicked the president off, for goodness sakes. So by Elon Musk purchasing it with as he stated, the intention of restoring free speech, this triggered the Ministry of Truth forming. And to me, I'm like, what is really going on there? We could do a whole episode on that. But it is interesting that it wasn't so crazy to say that with that episode, to talk about that, you know?
No, definitely not. I mean, although there wasn't this new Ministry of Truth segment of our government formed at that point in time in 2020, there were still patterns of regulating speech and censorship and flagging and, you know, all of that censorship related stuff going on in the digital world. So that was there for sure. Although there wasn't one overseeing body of people regulating it, you know, those behaviors and those trends were still apparent. So,
well, it's crazy. Even some of the phrases like war's peace. I mean, with the Ukraine stuff, that's kind of what's been marketed to us. That, I mean, we literally have had celebrities that are kind of almost calling for a nuclear war. Like, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, they're like, okay, guys, we need to go and we need to hop on this war because this is what will solve
world peace.
Peace.
And you're like, wait a second. What?
And it's just like, what? You don't throw fire onto a fire and think you're not going to have a fire.
Yeah. No.
It's actually idiotic.
Well, and that it also goes to show, like, we dealt with the whole Afghanistan thing too, where that was kind of marketed to us as this peaceful experience, and then we left billions of dollars of ammunition and military gear there and guns.
I think it was 88 billion worth of artillery and equipment that we never got back.
So yeah, that was definitely the time of like the election and all that stuff, and we were so drained after that. I mean,
oh my gosh. Yeah, I think the most draining aspect was sort of what I just mentioned, just the amount of content absorption through social media, through all of the podcasts that I was listening to. And also when we were out in California, because we were at school, we were still on heavy lockdown. So we weren't really able to do as many activities as we had been doing before out there. So it was really isolating, and we found ourselves coming across people who were, I guess I'll put it lightly, like we were finding ourselves in situations and conversations with people that made us realize how much more isolated we were in how we were thinking. And that was a definite social and emotional challenge that I hadn't really faced yet at that level in my life yet. So I learned a lot just about, you know, how to respect people, how to be, how to hold myself in conversations like that. You know, not forcing anything down people's throats and just being a good listener, listening to people, hearing people out. And then when I can find a place to talk, then I will. But it's very strategic and it's respectful. And yeah, I feel like those were like the biggest things that I learned in some of those discussions for sure.
And that was when we started seeing things being presented super like black and white to us.
Yes.
And that was when we started to get kind of freaked out and be like, okay, well, what if things aren't as black and white? What if things are more dichotomous? What if things are more blurred? They're more gray. And that was when we did the episode on the gray area, which is one of my favorite episodes. But this was just about how, you know, in life, and this kind of goes back to I support the current thing. Like, we are kind of being, honestly, like, mind controlled and brainwashed through social media to just get into these like default positions. And that way we're always divided as a country. We're always doing like trying to get our social credit score points, all that stuff. And no one's actually like solving problems, and no one's even identifying who the true enemy is.
Mm-mm.
And that was what the whole gray area thing was we realized that like most people don't know how to just sit in the gray area and be like, things are mixed.
Yeah.
Therefore, we're in a constant right versus left dilemma, and it's pointless.
It is pointless. It's definitely not worth our time. Yeah, no, I think most things in life are nuanced. Even people, like our personalities are nuanced, our backgrounds, our genes are nuanced. Like, I mean, nothing is this or that, yet we try to boil everything down to it being this or that. And I don't really know what the psychology of, the psychology in our human nature is that explains why we want that or why we find that easier. Um, I I think it could be connected to convenience. It's just convenience. It's more convenient for our time and for our mental energy to not have to actually think about something and take a step back and to just resort to one of those this or that sides, especially when it's being force fed to you via social media. Like it's definitely more convenient and time saving to not reserve that mental energy towards figuring it out on your own and just sort of take it as is.
Yeah,
So
and I think that before we had figured that out, when we were going through the election, it did make us feel like, oh, we were in this camp and we couldn't express ourselves around other people because they're so on the other side, when in reality it's like, okay, if you take politics out of it, like you might have a lot of common ground with a lot of people. So like, why do we have to be so isolated, and why do people have to assume how you think or how I think, and why did 80% of young people vote for Biden? Like why is that? Like why can't things just be, I don't know, just up in the air? And that was when that whole, post-election, post-January 6th, we did the people versus the elite episode. And this was when you started to see Elon kind of take that role of encouraging people to like buy different cryptocurrencies.
Dogecoin emerged.
Yeah. Yes, the meme.
Yeah.
And then what else happened? Oh, well, the GameStop.
Yeah, okay. So I love how we just like casually brush through January 6th.
Well, we actually did have an episode on that one, but
we tried not to touch it though too much because honestly, I think when you really boil down to it, like we were thinking on a different level. We had already figured out there's a third dimension. So we're not going to knowingly sink and stay on this, dual dimension plane because it's a waste of time. Like we're just going to bypass that and start talking about the third dimension. We did an episode on the Great Reset when we finally started figuring out what that entire plan entailed and who was behind it. If you don't know what the Great Reset is, we could honestly talk about it for like the rest of this episode. We're not going to do that. I would highly recommend you guys go listen to our first episode. It's titled The Great Reset.
But at that time, the Great Reset was not something that was thrown around on Twitter casually. It was not something that Joe Rogan knew about yet. It wasn't even something that like Tim Dillon was talking about yet. This was something that still, like when Jordan first brought up to me the Great Reset, I didn't know what it was. I did know what the World Economic Forum was, but I just thought it was this like fun group that posted like aesthetic videos about saving the planet on Instagram. I had no idea what they really were about, and I had no idea that there was like this global effort. I thought it was very like US versus China versus Russia. Like I didn't understand that the US was bad, like the government was bad, and I didn't understand that like the European Union was bad, and like that all these groups were a part of that, and that there were these other agendas, like you said, this third dimension. I wasn't exposed to that yet, and I didn't. And then we finally had an entity, the first group, to name it, and then we found other ones.
Yes.
Yeah,
and then we realized how interrelationally connected all of these people were, and from all of these different places, Angela Merkel from Germany and Justin Trudeau of Canada.
New Zealand
and,
woman.
You
Yeah.
know, the Pelosi freaking Newsom family heirloom, like so many random groups. And for a couple weeks, like we really sat and pondered and tried to research as much as we could.
I cried when it was so overwhelming that I cried and I broke down and I was like, I don't know if I can't handle this. And
Mom, pick me up.
yeah. And it was hard. It was hard at first being around people who weren't on the same page about this, because at least with like the election stuff, it still was tangible. And even if you weren't surrounded by people that were like, quote, on your side.
And familiar.
Yes.
It was familiar. It's familiar to go through an election where a candidate that you didn't vote for wins. It's normal. We've learned about it forever. Since day one, we've been learning U.S. history. We've been learning, U.S. government. It's familiar.
They don't teach
Trying
you this.
to educate yourself on foreign policy and global powerhouses and agendas that we don't even understand. And Davos, like, what the hell? For so long, I was so confused. I'm like, okay, so it's a place, but it's also a conference, but it's also the name of a group of people.
Yeah.
And it's also like every year, and they meet every year. And I was trying to understand, like, why do they do this? Why do they go to this random place in Switzerland? Like, what do they do there? Is it just like a powwow, or they drink hot cocoa and like talk about foreign policy, or like what the heck? So there's so many questions. And then, actually probably one of the most interesting realizations was that transcript that came out from the 2019 revolving around COVID.
Yes.
I think that was the instigator that really
Woke
got
us
us. Yeah.
I agree. I think we would have been more susceptible to being coerced into taking like the vaccine, into staying in lockdown. I mean, granted, I think that we thought before finding out about that and that documentation, and that they had basically gone through the stimulation before they even knew about COVID. Mm-hmm. But I think that we thought, at least, we were just looking at it. We were looking at COVID and we were like, this just doesn't make sense. And we were just saying, oh, these people are incompetent. That's why they're doing these bad policies. They're incompetent. But no, like they're doing these bad policies because they were controlled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was
once we had that realization, it sort of all clicked, and our brains realized, okay, this isn't just incompetence. For months and months since March, we're in this loop of, oh my gosh, how are people this dumb? This doesn't make sense. Something's missing here. Mm-hmm. And then coming across that just was sort of the last piece of the puzzle. And I feel like just really instantaneously built that muscle for us to be like, okay, this is not a left versus right thing. This isn't a liberal versus conservative type of playing field. This is a multidimensional, here's this third dimension, and this third dimension is pretty much consisting of all of the most elite of the elite people in our entire world. Yeah. And that's who played a tremendously impactful role in COVID-19, in the pandemic, in many big events leading up to that. But because of the digital world that we have right now and social media and the access to this information that we have via the internet, we were able to figure it out quicker than previous generations did.
You're right. And that's why I think when you talk about this stuff with people that are older than us, they can't handle it because they didn't grow up in a world where even though people are like, oh, the internet's censored, which it is, but it is still more free than pre-internet. Because pre-internet, you had to go through channels, the radio, TV. These are very controlled channels. They were not letting information about the Great Reset go through TV networks in the 60s. So that's why if you're telling a grandparent about this or someone older, they might have a harder time grappling with this because they've lived 70, 80 years of this world that is non-realistic. It is a fake sense of security and a fake sense of stability, and that goes back to what we when we initially picked up on Take Charge of the New World. The new world has always been the same world. It was just the old world that we had for the last 80 years was a false sense of stability, and now everything is breaking down because it was false. It was an illusion. And so I think the people who are older are having a harder time because that's all they've known is the illusion. So they don't realize that was
And
the
their
exception,
illusion was
not
good.
the rule. Yeah. So I get why you think that that's the default.
Yeah, like they lived this, idealistic, stable life along all of their peers who also had some pretty good lives. So in their group, their network, and their generation, they think that they have it all. They had a good life. So why would they distrust this system that has given them all of this? Why would they question it? Why would they,
Go against
look
it.
at people like us who are from this different time with this different knowledge and these different experiences and discount what we're going through? Why would they do that? Because they don't need to. I get it. I totally get the psychology, but
No, it totally makes sense. But it's nevertheless it's there. And I like what you said about the third dimension, because I think I didn't, after the election, I stopped listening. For example, Ben Shapiro, I didn't listen to him for over 2 years or whatever, a year, whatever that was. And then he was on Joe Rogan a few months ago, and I just I was okay, I'll flip through it and see what he has to say. It had been over a year or so.
I did the same thing,
And
actually.
I was so frustrated because he was still talking. He hadn't evolved at all. He was still talking about the pandemic, and he was saying these people are incompetent. These people, it's all political. They're just doing this.
Yeah.
Because and one of his things was, oh well, people, they need to, politicians, that when they don't have a solution to fix something, they just pretend that there's a solution. And I'm like, no, I think that that's a lot deeper than that. And when you have Joe Rogan challenging Ben Shapiro more on this third dimension, and he cannot go there, that is where that separation falls,
But the reason why Ben can't go there, though, and I don't know if he does this knowingly or not. I don't think he does it knowingly, but think of his entire brand, his entire marketing strategy, I feel like what he's built, it's facts, it's dichotomies, it's this or that. He's a very black and white type of person. And I honestly think that him and his peers at the Daily Wire too, they all kind of fall under that same sort of methodology, especially in media. So he kind of loses his audience if he acknowledges that third dimension. And because kind of once you acknowledge it, and this is what we realized during this time, once you acknowledge it, you can't not acknowledge it.
You can't go back.
I cannot listen to any media type of person or anyone talking about current events right now. Obviously I listen to everything and take it with a grain of salt, but I don't enjoy it. And I always have it in the back of my mind. If I'm picking up on the fact that they are not acknowledging that third dimension at all and are only talking about, stuff on the ground, politicians this, politicians that, legislation, data, this, that, and not, taking it to that higher level. So
Yeah. I think someone that helped us a lot do that was Tim. I say Tim like I know him. But
we
no.
do. What are you talking about? We know everything about him.
Yeah, I think I found, I've said this before, but I found Tim after the election, Tim Dillon, and he opened my eyes a lot to this stuff and to that third dimension, and he did it through comedy. So he like healed my soul after finding out about the Great Reset, because he showed me that this isn't new. He references MK Ultra, he references 9/11, he references the Stanford Prison Project. He references
Epstein.
I didn't understand Epstein. I that was a whole awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that he made us realize that this happens all the time. Like, this isn't the first time that this has happened.
Which even more solidified what our realizations were.
Yes.
Because, yeah, when some of these things happen, especially 9/11, we were 2 years old.
Yeah.
We weren't as adult minds being able to understand the series of events that led up to that during that time. So we're kind of having to do extra homework, reteaching ourselves the history that our schools didn't teach us.
It's going to be like our kids having
and
to
most
learn
parents didn't even help supplement either.
Yeah.
Because the parents have been indoctrinated. The boomer generation, Gen X, millennials, it's an ongoing.
Well, that's something I think about is like, am I going to get in full on, like when I send my kids to school and they're in history class and they come home and they say something like, hey mom, did you know that like COVID, like they say something about COVID, and I'm like, I lived through that. Like, that is false.
Fake news.
But do you know what I mean?
Literally just play them a podcast episode.
I know, but
from this time.
But like our parents, they lived through 9/11, but because the internet wasn't exploding then, they did just listen to the mainstream thing. And I remember like I watched the documentary that we've referenced before on the podcast, 9/11 is the new Pearl Harbor, with my parents, and then it was like, oh my gosh, Tower 7. Like that never made sense. Mm-hmm. And then we all came to the realization at the same time. But like you said, it was like I had to backpedal because I wasn't born during that time. You know?
Yeah. It's extra brain work for sure.
Yeah. Should I play a Tim Dillon like clip, that episode?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I just took these off.
While you're finding it, I'm gonna say this quote that I found in a YouTube comment that I really loved.
Okay.
So
Let's talk about Clubhouse.
J.R.R. Tolkien, you guys know, he wrote Lord of the Rings. Best conveyor of fantasy, Tim Dillon. Best conveyor of reality. It's true.
I like that.
I mean, he talks about reality.
Yeah.
And it's very realistic. I mean, he is an exaggerator for sure, but that's his comedic style. And I just think he does a great job.
This is our most popular episode on YouTube. And this was a time we started doing video episodes, and we hadn't done that before. And we started doing that, and it was fun because we kind of got to have a different experience. It was definitely more work to do the video because you have to like dress up and be more presentable and like set the stage. But more editing. But it was fun. And this was an episode where we did some drinking.
That's actually because I absolutely love it. And I think that when we have talked about like the future of communication and where it's going to lead and even become more interactive and visceral, I think that Clubhouse is sort of like the perfect segue right now because you know how when Zoom first came out and we had to use it because of the pandemic, it was kind of the only option to have both visual and audio to be able to like be as in person as you possibly can. I think that Clubhouse allows for that in a much less data heavy way where you don't obviously have the visual component, but going forward, I think that social media will become more so this experience with having just more of an authentic verbal communication methodology than just typing words out on a post. You know, the white tents and they're sitting there with the perfect picnic table and the pillows and the charcuterie board. So we have one of those setups and I was like, okay, that's strange. And it's like a grandmother and her son doing a photo shoot there. And I was like, that's strange.
And then I'm at the beach all day and I walk back and it's a totally different crew using the same charcuterie board, pillows, table, etc. set up on the beach. And I'm realizing this woman, her business is she stakes out there. She's an Airbnb experience person, most likely, and just rotates people in and out of this Instagrammable setup. And now it makes so much sense, like how these influencers are always doing that type of stuff.
So she. Okay, so both of those clips are
Not really
so
relevant.
random and different, and yeah, not really random to the episode topic, but I love that we kind of just like brought in random things.
That was a really fun time of my. That was a really good time of my life. It was a time where people started getting out and about. Finally in California, it was a time where we didn't know what was going to happen with LA. We didn't know where things were going. And I think in that episode, we started to predict some of the vaccine passport stuff. I can't remember though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we touched on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's when people started getting their first round of vaccines. I don't think in our age group, but definitely older age groups were. So that was happening. And yeah. And we pretty much blew smoke up Tim's ass the entire episode too.
Yeah.
And I spilled wine all over the table.
Well, that was when I literally
We ruined the blank.
I talked to Tim on Clubhouse a few times during that time period. Like Jordan and I would be in class and our rooms were next to each other and we'd be like texting while we were in class. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like go in Clubhouse right now. It's like Tim's on. And like
we tried to like ambush him every day and
Yeah.
you had success with it.
I got pulled up to the like speaker area, I think like 3 or 4 times. And one of the times he was like, oh, I see you have like a podcast because it was in my bio. And he gave my podcast a shout out. And then one of the times I think Jordan recorded it because we were doing like a bit.
Yeah.
Anyways. So, that was fun. That was just like a weird time in life. I don't know.
You're right though that we were wrong about Clubhouse. I still think that Clubhouse as a technology was a great technology. That was a good idea. That sort of a platform wasn't found anywhere else. And Twitter sort of picked up on what it offered. And then now Twitter does that same live spaces thing. But nobody likes that because it's oversaturated. You can't have every single feature exist all on one platform. We've seen this with Instagram. Nobody likes Reels as much as they do TikTok because the features that are native to whatever platform that launches those features always has more success. So Clubhouse as that first adopter of that specific feature, I think was really interesting and cool. Although I don't know why people weren't into it. It just didn't hit in the way that it probably could have. But
I'm kind of glad Clubhouse didn't catch on because I'm glad that the real world got restored and that we didn't stay in the digital space forever. I'm glad that like we started going back in person.
me too.
I don't like that halfway through that we started doing the COVID passports. That was not cool. But I'm just in general, I'm really grateful that for the most part we got back to some sort of sense of how life used to be, but more enlightened. I think that that's the best thing that came out of all this was just being more enlightened to things, and especially the health stuff because that was just so critical.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Meanwhile, through that year or two process, you and I had our own journeys of figuring out health, and we would help educate one another, and we still do that because I think that's what friends do.
Yeah.
And especially during the COVID vaccine passport time, because there was just a lot of like medical information and like hearing so many case stories and
The data getting released, it's
Like-
still getting released. The Pfizer report, they just did another big dump today with the Pfizer data. I think the final number of the vaccine efficacy was 12% effective.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nuts what really has come out and what was marketed to us.
Yeah, it's like all that drama, all of those lost friendships and like heated arguments with people that everyone was involved with over this vaccine ended up not only not working, but not really mattering in terms of like function in society because all the mandates were dropped. And it's just like, for what? And now like COVID's not even a thing anymore. We all just needed to build immunity from day one. And for those of us who did do that, like, cool, now we're good. But for those who didn't do that and ended up going down this never ending cycle of like, 2 vaccines and then all these boosters and now are dealing with all of these health issues because of it. I mean, I feel horrible for those people. I don't know how they're going to escape it.
But
It's uncharted territory.
and again, that goes back to if you don't look for the signs to wake up, and it's never too late to wake up. It's never too late. But if you aren't aware of those signs, or if you wake up and then you want to stay back asleep because it is too scary to be woken up, that is not a good place to be, because that leaves you vulnerable to things that not only are affecting your physical health, but like you said, are affecting your mental and spiritual health as well. And for me, I think the last few months I've really detached even from this like third dimension and moved into this fourth dimension, which I think is kind of the spiritual realm of all of this. And we were talking about this before we started recording, but things got so macro for us when we were dissecting this, when we were discovering who's in charge, what's going on, what's the agenda, that it then became so micro suddenly.
Yes. Macro to micro.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that fourth dimension goes beyond humans on Earth. It's a set of forces that we can't even understand. That's why it's the fourth dimension. Our brains just can't. We don't have the capacity to. And we're not talking about the freaking multiverse in the Marvel movies. We're talking about, spiritual forces that, we are just not built to wrap our heads around. And so that can even be boiled down to the smallest micro dichotomy, which is pretty much as good versus evil.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think I'm still figuring out a lot about it, but it is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought that up, though, just about like the spiritually charged things in the world right now, and then that birthed that conversation because
Everything.
I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, everything is. I think I've gotten to the point where I just am like, oh, like I don't need to stay in this state of feeling disturbed and feeling distraught and feeling like this is so overwhelming. This is too dark for me to handle, because the truth is like there has been darkness and evil in the world for a very, very long time. And most likely it will stay here until this earth ends, because that's just how it works. That's just how it is. And we've been lucky enough to be given the gift of life. And even that is not guaranteed. And so for us to, we aren't guaranteed only goodness. We're guaranteed to be born into this world and like figure that out and navigate that and try to choose being good and try to choose having, essentially like choosing.
We're guaranteed free will.
Yeah.
We're guaranteed that palette of, or that, I guess, toolkit to determine who we want to be, how we want to conduct ourselves, how to see the world, how to see other people, how to fill our lives of whatever it may be, whoever it may be with. And that is, I mean, there's so many beauties that come with free will, but there's a lot of suffering that comes with free will too, especially when it comes to temptation, when it comes with filling our lives with things that, might be convenient, but can come with detriment to our health and our mental health and our relationships and responsibility and all of these things that you also have to factor in too. So it's a double-edged sword, and it can be really hard to navigate. I don't know why people feel so entitled to certain things. I think that's like a really serious problem in America, especially, and especially for generations that COVID being the first serious shift in like our lifestyle habits. I feel like for generations that had it really good for the majority of their lives so far, it's been really hard to realize certain things and make those pivots where they need to. But
Yeah, I just think it's like once you realize, okay, not only has the elites been pushing for the Great Reset for the last 100 years since Rockefeller, but no, like the elites have been pushing for this since the beginning of time. This is nothing new. This is just it. This is just the struggle of the world. And I think it really boils down to, do you want to live a life that is fearful of death or not? And if you are afraid of dying, then you will always live in fear and you will be enslaved to that fear. Mm-hmm. And if you, there was a great quote that I heard at the movie actually yesterday, and I wanted to say this, but, oh my gosh, where is it? Shoot, it was such a good quote. Sad.
No pressure if you can't find it. We'll throw it into the next episode.
Okay, I found it. If you never get past fear, you are never free.
Yeah.
Which,
short and sweet.
I love that. And I think I was listening to one of our older episodes and we like referenced the term secular religion a lot. And I think what I've realized is it's not that people have adopted secular religions. It's that they've adopted things that are deeply spiritual positions, whether a lot of them being dark positions that have been masked as just like normal, like physical debates. And then they get put into these lower dimensions so that people can't recognize, oh, wait, this is actually like way bigger than a political issue or a whatever. Mm-hmm. So those words are used to like, I think, not make things as like serious or as evident as they really are.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, we just pushed the whole conversation about death, and I guess, yeah, literally that. We just pushed it out of society so much, and it's so foreign. And also, we just pushed the entire conversation of acknowledging suffering out of the equation, too. It's like every problem that we're trying to solve, that all these corporations and that capitalism is trying to solve, is simple conveniences, and we're trying to minimize the amount of inconvenience as much as possible. But the problem is the one inconvenience that will never, ever, ever be solved is we're not immortal. Like, we all are going to die.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's just something that we have to digest.
I think what's interesting is if you do believe in like an afterlife, then we are kind of immortal, but you have to like surrender in order to achieve being immortal. And let's say in order to achieve like going to that good place after you die, the one thing you have to do is get over the fear of death in order to achieve that. So if you are always afraid of death, you will never get to immortality. Yes. But the people that are at the top and the people that are elites and the people that are so scared of death and that will do anything at any cost, anything, like any evil
even
thing.
Sacrificing other humans.
Even exactly. No, seriously, sacrificing other lives. That is why, because they are so, like you said, so afraid of death, and they can't just like trust that there is something else on the other side of that, of this earth that might be better. And none of us know. I mean, I don't know. I'll see when I die what happens, but
know either.
that's just my feeling.
Well, then I'm glad you clarified that the immortal in that context means, your soul is immortal.
Yes.
When I was
You're
when
talking
I
about
was
your
using that,
body.
I was talking about, yes, the biological, physical nature
Yeah.
of being immortal. We are not,
No.
that we know of.
No.
But
But also what's crazy too is like the like mind control aspect of this too, which we want to do like an episode on this, but I feel like that's been kind of part of this like fourth dimension as well, is realizing that it's very easy to kind of sedate a population through social media, through TV, through culture. And like we talked about this with like the Travis Scott episode, but there's just so much stuff that we get exposed to on a daily basis that we aren't realizing like, oh, that's pushing like a certain mindset or not. I don't know.
spiritually charged, that's the word you came up with that I really like.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not the inventor of it, but yeah. Yeah, there's like so many little things here and there, even in fashion. Certain symbols, certain numbers that are used, certain colors, they all elicit tones and feelings within us that we might not understand are leaving an impact in a negative. All right, for those who are watching the video version, we have a beautiful image of Hillary Clinton, former First Lady Hillary Clinton, at the Met Gala this week. And yeah, the top is gorgeous. The top half of the image is beautiful. And then the bottom half is just her feet. And there is a man who's wearing a mask, and he is fixing her dress for her. He's kneeling down, head down. The cameras aren't on him. The cameras are on her. Her face is lit perfectly. She's glowing. And then here's this man, this poor man who's having to wear a mask, a freaking diaper on his face, even though the mandates are not here anymore. Because what? She needs her dress fixed and nobody's talking about it?
And this is the second Met Gala in the last year, because the last one was only, 8 months ago?
Yes.
And they're all still wearing masks, the people working the event.
It's just how it is now. The help wear masks. The help don't get photographed. The help don't get, a thank you while the celebrities walk the red carpet. But the red carpet filled with all these elite people is just the place to be, and they're exempt from everything.
I know. And that was crazy that the Roe versus Wade thing happened like that same night too. Like it just is all, I feel like everything is coming. I mean, we're kind of running out of time to get into everything that's happening right now and like what our predictions are. But I do feel just like wrapping that up and saying that, if you have any like takes or anything.
Well, it is definitely interesting that news dropped about the Roe versus Wade draft on the exact same day as the Met Gala, like the exact same time. Leaks like that don't just happen. I mean, the odds of that are pretty statistically improbable. I listened to someone say that a leak of that magnitude over something as divisive as the Roe versus Wade debate, it could be as detrimental and violence inducing as like a terrorist threat, because just how split this country is over that. And after everything we've all been going through in the last 2 years, people are just very passionate. And so it just makes me think, what the heck is that timing? What is that? Who is behind that? I mean, this goes beyond just lawsuits and tracking down the people who are behind that leak. Like there's definitely some sort of agenda behind that. It seems very curated and not coincidental.
Yeah, I think looking to the future, I think you and I are definitely in a place where we are skeptical about everything, and we're always like, we're trying to see like what are these like third and fourth dimensions to the first and second dimension. And I think it's like, yeah, hearing something to the effect of, oh, this got leaked, You're like, what?
Like, ah, shucks.
Yeah, like we're not.
The paper flew out the window.
Like, that isn't gonna fly anymore. Like, we're done.
No,
We're
it's
done
not
with
a
that.
dog ate my homework and like shat it out. Like, no, this is these documents and this information is locked up. We've been doing this for years.
And what's crazy is I'm really excited to keep talking about this stuff. I think that things are getting. I think that this stage where we were living, where things were comfortable for so long here, it's all unraveling, and this is also part of it, because I think the fact that we've had this abortion debate that it's been boiling, the water's been boiling for a really long time, and it's finally like coming to the surface, and it's finally like getting hashed out, is definitely fits into that category of stuff just not just going with the flow anymore. Like everything's boiling to the top, and all the ugliness is just being seen, and people are just gonna have to deal with it.
You know what? I'm fine with it. Like, I think we all knew it was gonna be messy no matter what. And I guess if it's messy and it's happening fast, at least it's happening.
Yeah.
At least that's kind of progress, you know? Symptoms are a good thing. Like, think about the body. When something's wrong and you feel pain, or, you know, you're bleeding or something needs to heal up, like the symptoms are good, because at least you know that there is a problem, and that the problem can then be identified and then can start to heal. And so with things coming to the surface and, you know, more chaos adding to pre-existing chaos, like it's just more wounds that we're realizing need like serious figuring out. So
Yeah. And I think that for me, moving in the forward with the podcast, I want to get better and better about just pushing this, having this be a platform for me to be held accountable, because that is what it's done for me for the past 3 years. It has held me accountable to my beliefs and kept not only a record of it, but forced me to say it out loud, so it's not just in my head. And that way, when I'm in a situation where I have to act, like I'm ready to act, as opposed to just, oh, I freeze up because I haven't even like expressed or worked through like how I'm feeling about something. So I really am appreciative about that. And I'm appreciative that this podcast has helped me work through like my fear of speaking the truth and talking about morality and talking about what is the right thing to do. And I want to, for the future, be more vulnerable, be able to share, like tie in more personal stuff to the podcast, because I think that's important, and just keep like chugging along and unraveling more dimensions.
figuring out different ways to communicate to ourselves, and then also to our audience, because I think that it can help all of us, you know, figure out more so what we think and help dissect ideas. I think another thing that I really appreciate about what we've done so far, and that I want to continue to do, is just destigmatize the essence of talking about your beliefs, because I think people think that they can't talk about what their political or philosophical values are until they have them like perfectly solidified, and then once they kind of say it, they have to stick with it. I think that there's, for whatever reason, people feel like they have to do that, and I've noticed that a lot, just from the content producers that I've listened to. But I don't want us to ever be like that. And I think that if we can put it in words also, that we recognize, hey, our thoughts have changed. Our thoughts have changed, whether it be due to finding out more information, or, you know, growing as people within ourselves. Like there are things that we'll come across in life on an ongoing basis that will shift our thinking. And I think that's just how it always is. That's a cyclical reality. So by admitting that and then helping to destigmatize and hopefully lessen that presence in the digital world of people feeling like they have to stick with consistency because that conveys that you're more adult or that you are more sophisticated or intelligent. I don't know. But no, I think the real intelligence and real authenticity comes with showcasing that evolution and
Not hiding from it.
not hiding from it, embracing it. So,
I love that.
And that's actually what this entire episode was today too, because
About our evolution, because we are so different than we were.
yeah, listening to clips, it's hard to listen to myself sometimes, especially like, it's embarrassing, but also there are certain things that I'm like, oh, maybe I haven't really changed that much in my thinking on. Maybe there are things that I did. Okay, so be it. And we move on. So maybe every 50 episodes or every milestone we'll do this and we'll look back.
Nice. Well, thank you guys for listening. Anything else that you want to say?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you guys for listening as well. We really appreciate you. And
thank you for all the support through the years. Continue to like and subscribe and to comment. And if everyone could send this to just one pal and have them subscribe, we could double our numbers, which would be sick. So
easy.
Yes. And that helps. That's the best way to support the show. And we love seeing the comments, especially. That's my favorite part.
100%. Yes. You guys, thank you so much. We will catch you very soon. Thank you for listening.
Bye.